Georges Simenon, drama on Boulevard Beaumarchais. When Martin, from the gambling division, left his office at 10 to 8, he was surprised to see the corridor still crowded with journalists and photographers. It was bitterly cold. Some had turned up their collars and were passing the time eating sandwiches. "Is Maigret still at it?" he asked as he walked by, at the far end of the corridor. Instead of heading for the stairs, Martin pushed open a glass door. Here, as in all departments of the judicial police, electricity was used sparingly. In the middle of the waiting room stood an enormous round sofa, upholstered in red velvet. A man in a coat and hat sat there, waiting. A few feet away, 2 inspectors stood smoking, while an elderly clerk had a quick bite in his glass office. Martin filled his pipe. In 15 minutes, he would be home, sitting down at dinner with his family. He had only stopped by out of curiosity, because for 2 days now, this case was all anyone talked about. "Well," he asked with the inspectors in a low voice. The man sighed and jerked his chin toward the door to Maigret's office. "Who's he with?" "Still the sister." The man on the sofa, sensing their whispering, slowly raised his head. He gave them a somber, almost reproachful look. He was a frail, sickly-looking man of about 40, with dark circles under his eyes and a thin black mustache. "He's been in there since this morning," the inspector whispered back. Just then, Maigret's door opened. The commissaire appeared. Since he left the door ajar, they could see into his smoke-filled office. There, in a green armchair, was the silhouette of a very young blonde woman. "Lucas," Maigret called out, squinting as if his eyes could no longer see clearly. "Go get some sandwiches, and stop by the brasserie for a few beers." Martin took the opportunity to shake his colleague's hand. "Any progress?" Maigret flushed, his eyes bright with fatigue. One could tell he would have given anything for a breath of fresh air. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll tell you this. If I don't wrap this up tonight, I'm dropping it. You don't understand? Well, I simply can't live in this atmosphere any longer." The man on the sofa, unable to hear the words, trembled in anticipation. But the commissaire stepped back inside, and the door closed again. Martin finally left, while the hand on the great clock crept toward a new hour, and the muffled shouts of the journalists could still be heard below. And yet, at first, the case had seemed utterly mundane. Last Sunday, on the 5th floor of a building on Boulevard Beaumarchais, the ground floor which was occupied by a pipe shop, 26-year-old Louise Voiven had died suddenly. By all appearances, she had been poisoned. In that comfortable, well-furnished apartment, which might have even been cheerful under other circumstances, lived Louise Voiven, her husband Ferdinand, a gemstone dealer, and her 18-year-old sister Nicole. It was this Nicole whom Maigret had been holding in his office for hours. She was holding up remarkably well. Though she nervously bit her handkerchief, she remained calm despite the heat and the stifling air. A lamp with large green shade sat on the desk, casting its light straight down. Maigret's face, rising above the lamp, remained in shadow, but the girl, sitting in a low armchair, was vividly illuminated. The curtains were not drawn, and one could see raindrops racing down the dark window panes, reflecting the street lamps along the quay. "They're bringing us something to drink," Maigret sighed with relief. It was so hot, he would have loved to strip off his collar and jacket. Yet the girl had not even removed her gray fur coat or the matching fur hat that gave her the look of a girl from the north, especially since she was such a pale blonde. What question could he ask that he hadn't asked already? And yet, he couldn't bring himself to let her go. He felt a vague, nagging necessity to keep her there, while her brother-in-law continued his vigil in the waiting room. For appearance's sake, he leafed through her file, as if by rereading the same details for the 100th time, the truth might finally flash before him. Even the very first report, filed at the local station regarding Sunday's events, was unsettling, despite its apparent simplicity. On the 5th floor, in a room at the far end of the apartment, we discovered the body of Louise Voiven, sprawled on the floor. Dr. Blind, summoned by the family half an hour earlier, stated that the woman had passed away just minutes before in violent convulsions. He confidently attributes the death to poisoning, whether criminal or accidental, undoubtedly caused by a very large dose of digitalis. And further, we questioned the husband, Ferdinand Voiven, 37, who insists he knows nothing. However, he claims that for several months his wife had shown signs of neurasthenia. We questioned Louise Voiven's sister, Nicole Lemure, 18, born in Orleans, who provided the same information as her brother-in-law. We questioned the concierge, who claimed that for a long time Louise Voiven, feeling unwell, feared she was being poisoned. Yes, it all happened exactly like that this past Sunday on All Saints' Day. It was raining, a cold, steady rain, and the air was thick with the scent of chrysanthemums and church incense. By evening, the prosecutor's office had already dispatched Maigret, soaked and in muddy boots, to Boulevard Beaumarchais. The pipe shop downstairs was already shuttered. But all of that was routine, a common drama. The true tragedy was something the waiting journalist had not yet sniffed out, for Maigret had only just uncovered it in the sweltering heat of his office. He waited impatiently for the refreshing beer, pointedly avoiding looking at the girl with the haggard face, who stared fixedly at the corner of his desk. "Come in," he barked. A waiter from the Brasserie Dauphine brought in the mugs of beer and sandwiches, eyeing Maigret's client out of the corner of his eye. "Will this do?" "Yes." "Take some to the gentleman waiting in the reception room as well." But when offered food and drink, Voiven merely shook his head, like a man utterly broken in spirit. Maigret stood there, chewing large mouthfuls of his sandwich, while the girl took tiny, delicate bites of hers. How long were they married? 8 years. A banal story of small people with narrow horizons. Ferdinand Voiven, a minor gemstone agent, had met Louise Lemure while in Orleans for an appraisal. Her parents ran a shoe shop. "In short, you were just a child then?" "I was 10 years old." "I suspect," he tried to joke, "that you weren't in love with your brother-in-law yet." "I don't know." He glanced at her sideways, and any desire to laugh vanished. "So, it's been a year since your father died, and your sister and her husband took you in?" "I moved in with them. Yes, that's right." "And when exactly did you become Voiven's mistress?" "May 17th. She said it clearly, almost with a touch of pride. "Do you love him?" "Yes." Looking at her, so fragile and yet so fervent, one might imagine a man who inspired such passion to be handsome or romantic. But he was not, and that was one of the most unsettling parts of the story. The agent was utterly unremarkable. One had to make an effort even to remember his face. His profession was entirely devoid of poetry. He spent hours lingering in cafes on Rue Lafayette, near the Diamond Exchange, and only a month ago had he managed to buy a modest second-hand car. On top of everything else, he wasn't even in good health. "And your sister?" "My sister was very jealous." "Did she love him?" "I don't know." "What did she say when she caught you?" "She said nothing. She wrote to me. Since then, we never spoke to each other. Not a single word." "And when was that?" "June 2nd. It was the 3rd time we were together." "On Boulevard Beaumarchais?" "Yes, in my room." Ferdinand thought Louise had gone out, but she was in the kitchen with the maid. "Didn't you think about living elsewhere?" "I wanted to. It was my sister who demanded that I stay." "Why?" "So it would be easier to watch us. She feared that if I didn't live in the apartment, it would be even easier for her husband to meet me in secret. And in the apartment, she never left us alone. She always wore soft slippers, so she could appear silently. How could you live for months without speaking a word to each other? We exchanged notes. For instance, my sister would write, "Have your laundry ready by tomorrow morning," or "Do not use the bathtub. It's leaking." And Voiven, he suffered greatly. From the very beginning, he stopped sleeping in his wife's bedroom and moved to the sofa in the living room. He swore to me that there was nothing left between them. Maigret counted on his fingers. June, July, August, September, October, 5 months. Did you really live like that for 5 whole months? She nodded, as if such a life were the most natural thing in the world. Did Ferdinand Voiven ever speak to you about getting rid of his wife? Never. I swear it. And he never suggested that you run away together? You don't know him, she sighed, shaking her head. He's an honorable man, you see. He's the same in business. Once he signs a contract, he fulfills it to the letter, no matter the cost. Ask anyone he works with. And yet, for months, your sister seemed to have a premonition of her end. She wrote 3 letters to a school friend, and in each one, she spoke of being poisoned. I know, my sister was losing her mind from spying on us. Almost every night she would open my bedroom door, and in the darkness, I could feel her hand touching my face. She wanted to be sure I was in my bed and that I was alone. One more question. Since the 2nd of June, have you seen Voiven alone? 3 or 4 times, away from the house, but my sister always found out. Every time, she would be waiting for us at the hotel door. She followed me everywhere. Once, she even ran out into the street in her slippers because she didn't have time to put on her shoes. Maigret had visited the apartment. It was as colorless as Voiven himself. He could picture the lives of these 3 people, trapped together. He felt as though he were circling the same questions over and over, like a horse in a ring, unable to find the exit. Did you know there was a container of baking soda in the bathroom cabinet? That was the heart of the matter. After Louise Voiven's death, the entire apartment had been searched. They had quickly found a glass containing medicine. Analysis showed it was digitalis, diluted in a small amount of water. Next to the glass, they found a packet labeled baking soda. But inside that packet was enough digitalis to kill 100 people. What were you doing last Sunday afternoon? The same as every Sunday. It was the hardest day of the week. Ferdinand was in the living room, going over his accounts. I was in my room, reading. My sister was supposed to be in hers. What did you have for lunch? I remember it perfectly. Pear. It was sent by one of Ferdinand's clients. She still spoke the name Ferdinand, with a warmth that suggested he was the most handsome and extraordinary of men. Were you deeply shocked by your sister's death? No. She didn't hide it. She even lifted her head to look him in the eye. My sister made him suffer too much. And was it his fault? I know he never loved her. He lived with her for 8 years, but he was never happy. My sister was always gloomy, always feeling unwell. In their first year of marriage, she had to have an operation, and she completely stopped being a woman like any other. Maigret stepped out for a moment and looked from the doorway at the man buried deep in the sofa. He had questioned him once already, but only briefly. He hesitated to begin one of those grueling, endless interrogations that exhaust both sides. He wouldn't eat? Maigret asked an inspector quietly. No. Claims he isn't hungry. Very well. Maigret, trying to bolster his own spirits, returned to his office, where Nicole sat motionless. Yes, by the way, since we're talking about illnesses, who in the house suffered from stomach pains? Ferdinand, she replied without hesitation. Rarely, but sometimes it would grip him, especially when he had heart palpitations. So, he had heart palpitations? He had some trouble with his heart. I think about 2 years ago, but he's almost recovered now. Do you know if your brother-in-law had any stomach pain in the last few weeks? Yes, he did, she confirmed with her usual certainty. On what date? The day we all fell ill. Do you remember what you ate? I don't remember that anymore. Did you call a doctor? No. Ferdinand didn't want to. During the night, we all had headaches. We were vomiting. Ferdinand thought there had been a gas leak. Was that the only time? Yes, at least the only time was that severe. Are you saying there were other times you felt unwell? I understand you, commissaire, she said, her voice tightening. But you won't make me lose my cool. I will hold out until the end, no matter what, because I know Ferdinand is innocent. If anyone were to have poisoned my sister, it wouldn't have been him. It would have been me. You see, I'm not afraid to say it. But you didn't do it? Maigret asked, a trace of irony in his voice. No, the thought never even crossed my mind. I would have killed her differently, I don't know how. But it's true, we've all been ill lately. I only wish you could have seen it for yourself. Can you imagine how we lived? At lunch or dinner, one of us would always refuse to eat. Do you know how many maids we went through in 5 months? 8. They said they didn't want to stay in a madhouse. She began to weep from the sheer strain. It wasn't the first time during the interrogation, but she quickly regained her composure. looking Maigret in the eye as if challenging his next question. I didn't even know if the window still opened. Sometimes I didn't dare walk to the corner of our street, knowing perfectly well my sister was right on my heels. So, in your opinion, your sister committed suicide? She didn't answer immediately, letting the weight of the question settle. In other words, you're claiming your sister went so far as to obtain a significant amount of digitalis, and instead of trying to poison you, she killed herself? I don't know. She admitted. It was clear she no longer believed that herself. It didn't fit her sister's character. Then how? It's some kind of mystery. In any case, Ferdinand did not kill her. And you? He was mistaken if he expected her to crumble. She lifted her head and, with a faint touch of irony, met his gaze once more. I think it would be best if we called your brother-in-law, Maigret grumbled. Or rather, wait, be so kind as to go to the waiting room while I receive him here. What are you going to say to him? She rose from the armchair, her anger flaring as she tore her handkerchief into tiny shreds with her teeth. Come in. Maigret called out, cracking the door. Mademoiselle will wait outside. He saw her out before Voiven entered, then gestured to the chair the girl had just vacated. A glass of beer? Voiven merely shook his head. Not hungry? My apologies for keeping you waiting. Your sister-in-law has told me so much. Tell me, what do you intend to do now? The agent struggled to lift his head, looking at the commissaire first with astonishment, then with suspicion, as if it were obvious to him that he wouldn't be leaving this place. One question, Voiven, because of your wife. Nicole couldn't speak to you when she wanted to. I suspect she wrote to you. He shook his head, trying to find a connection. No. Why? When people are as in love as the two of you, it was impossible. My wife would have found the letters. She spent her days tearing the apartment apart, rummaging through my clothes, even my shoes. Maigret sighed. He would have given anything to see Nicole's devotion directed at someone else. Anyone, rather than this mediocre man. Mediocre in everything, even his despair. You could have found a hiding place. I'm telling you, Louise would have found it. The commissaire seemed to let the matter drop. A pity? By the way, I wanted to ask you something else. About those heart pains you had. Ferdinand managed a grim smile. I was expecting that question. Then answer it. Yes, I was prescribed digitalis, but I haven't taken it for 2 years. Nevertheless, you knew its effects. You must have been warned that in large doses. Listen, commissaire, I did not kill my wife. I am already convinced that Nicole didn't poison her either. You suspected her? Oh, no. Calm yourself. You tell me you didn't kill your wife. Nicole didn't kill her. Now I shall ask you a question that I will allow you to leave unanswered. Listen to me carefully. Voiven, knowing your wife as well as you did, so jealous she would endure her sister's presence in her own home just to deny you the chance of a secret tryst. Knowing her, I say, would you dare to claim she could have done it? I mean, commit suicide, knowing that by doing so she would leave the field wide open for the two of you? Think about it. I don't know. Well then, answer or don't, but let there be no more lies, Voiven. No more of these slippery evasions. Voiven's lips began to tremble. Suddenly, a foul odor filled the room, betraying the physical toll of his mounting panic. Without a word, Maigret walked to the window and threw open, returning to his desk. He slowly filled his pipe and drained the last of his beer. If you like, I can help you, he said in a silky voice. I assume you would prefer that I don't invite your sister-in-law back in just yet. Voiven was weeping now, perhaps from humiliation, perhaps from pain. Maigret paced the office, his voice steady, pointedly looking away. Stop me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. You travel to Antwerp from time to time, don't you? I've thought about this a lot. Antwerp and Amsterdam, the great diamond centers. There, it would have been easier than in France, and with less risk, to obtain a quantity of digitalis. That explains why our searches in Paris and the suburbs turned up nothing. Water? Voiven groaned, his voice strangled. He looked so utterly defeated that Maigret felt a flicker of discomfort. He took a bottle of cognac from his private cupboard and poured the agent a full glass. By nature, you aren't a cheerful man. You marry a girl, and in the first year of your marriage, an operation makes her age years in a single stroke. You keep working, joylessly, pedantically, and at some point, you feel your heart weakening. Is that it? It was nothing serious. No matter, but then your sister-in-law falls into your arms, and suddenly you are young and alive again. You're in love, madly in love, but you hold your word too sacred to leave your wife and start a new life. You are a weak man, contemptible, I might even say. On the day your wife caught you, you did nothing. I'd like to know what you would have done in my place. It doesn't matter. Life on Boulevard Beaumarchais becomes a torture every day, every minute. If you are incapable of leaving your wife, you're even more incapable of giving up your sister-in-law. Stop me if it's all true. You are one of those weak people who provoke catastrophes. I understand now. You are the kind who, out of fear of being alone, would drag a whole crowd into the next world with you. Life became unbearable, and you planned for all three of you to die together. That explains why you bought so much poison. Am I right? How could you have guessed? Up to that point, it was simple, but your wife's death and hers alone I couldn't explain. But you gave me the answer yourself. I've only just realized it. First, admit that on at least 2 occasions you performed what might be called a dress rehearsal. You slipped small doses of digitalis into the food, which made everyone ill. I wanted to know. Exactly. You were afraid. You couldn't bring yourself to die. You tried to get a sense of it through tiny doses. As for the rest, your answer to one of my last questions cleared everything up. Your wife watched everything you did, searched every corner of the apartment, even your shoes. Where, under those conditions, could you hide the digitalis? And what medicine did you alone use? Voiven stared at him, bewildered and silent. Now it all falls into place. The digitalis was hidden behind an innocent label, baking soda, and you would undoubtedly have hesitated for weeks, perhaps months. I don't think I ever could have done it, the agent groaned. No matter, in any case, you would have hesitated much longer if an accident hadn't occurred. A client sent you a hair as a gift. Your sickly wife was unsettled by the heavy food. She opened the medicine cabinet, saw the baking soda, and put a spoonful into her glass. Voiven buried his face in his hands. That is all. Maigret snapped, throwing the window even wider. Listen, there's a washroom next door. Perhaps you'd like to go there before I call your sister-in-law. The agent slipped like a shadow into the next room. Maigret opened the door to the waiting room. Please come in, Mademoiselle Nicole. Your brother-in-law will be here in a moment. Then, suddenly, you have no desire to die, do you? No. So much the better. But be careful. Of what? Nothing. Just don't let yourself be dragged in. What did he tell you? He told me nothing. Do you still think he's guilty? You can settle that with him yourself. Where is he? Maigret had to turn away, to hide a grim smile. He is composing himself, he said. Maigret relit his extinguished pipe. Voiven entered the office timidly, fumbling like a man blinded by a sudden bright light. Ferdinand. Nicole cried. No, not here, please, Maigret grumbled, his brow furrowed.